A wooden boy whose nose betrays every lie. It sounds absurd, nothing more than a child's bedtime story. But its true meaning is far older and not meant for children at all. Hidden inside Pinocchio is the memory of ancient idols carved from sacred wood believed to house living spirits. It is the echo of a forgotten trial, not of lies and noses, but of souls imprisoned within timber waiting to be set free. What if Pinocchio was never just a puppet? What if he is the last survival of a ritual once whispered in temples where wood was flesh and statues were not silent at all? Because Pinocchio is older, stranger, and far darker than you think. Before we uncover its secrets, let us return to the story you think you know. Once upon a time, there was a poor old woodcarver named Geppetto. In his tiny workshop under the smell of sawdust and varnish, he shaped a puppet from a simple block of pine. The puppet had a face both comical and uncanny, its smile stiff, its limbs jointed, its eyes painted yet strangely alive. Geppetto named him Pinocchio. But this was no ordinary puppet. The moment Geppetto finished his work, something strange stirred. The puppet blinked, stretched, and laughed. It spoke, moved, and danced as though a soul had been breathed into the wood. Geppetto, though startled, embraced him as a son he had never had. Yet Pinocchio was restless. He was mischievous, stubborn, and most of all, a liar. Each falsehood he told betrayed him, for his wooden nose stretched longer and longer, marking him for what he truly was. Something not yet real, not yet human. And so begins his journey. He runs away from home, tempted by promises of fame and fortune drawn by tricksters and predators. He joins a puppet theater, but there he learns he is nothing more than an object of amusement. He is deceived by the fox and the cat who steal his money and leave him abandoned. He is lured into the land of toys where children play without consequence, only to discover the price is transformation into grand donkeys sold for labor. Everywhere Pinocchio goes, he is tested. He is beaten, mocked, even hanged from a tree, left to dangle between life and death. He is swallowed whole by a monstrous sea creature entombed in its belly, until at last he finds Geppetto again. And in the end, after all the trials and punishments, he becomes transformed. No longer wood,
Pinocchio.
no longer a puppet.
We made it!
A real boy. His reward, we are told, is honesty,
thank
obedience,
goodness.
and filial love. The puppet who lied becomes the son who redeems his father. But pause here. For Hans Christian Andersen never claimed the princess and the pea was his invention, and neither did Carlo Collodi, the man who wrote The Adventures of Pinocchio in 1881. Like Andersen, Collodi insisted he was only writing down something older, a folk memory that had lived in Italy long before his pen touched the page. And if we look closely, the story Collodi shaped is stranger, darker, and more violent than the one we know today. In the original text, Pinocchio is not charming but cruel, and his punishment severe. He kills the talking cricket with a hammer. He weeps only when suffering forces him to change. The fairy who guides him is not a gentle mother figure, but a spectral girl with blue hair, sometimes appearing as his sister, sometimes his ghostly guardian. This is no light-hearted fable. It is a tale of ordeal, of death and rebirth, of wood haunted by a soul that struggles toward humanity. But where did such a story come from? Why would a puppet carved from pine be chosen to suffer trials meant for mortals? If we follow the trail backward past Collodi's pen, past the fairy tale pages, into older myths and forgotten rituals, we begin to see echoes of something far stranger. Across cultures, wood has always been more than wood. It has been sacred. It has been alive. And sometimes it has held the soul of gods. In the story of Pinocchio, a block of wood breathes,
divine
speaks,
one,
and suffers like a man.
Awaken and
This
see the
seems
world
absurd until we
anew.
remember that across the ancient world, wood was never only dead matter. It was sacred, a vessel where divinity might dwell. In Italy itself, where Pinocchio was born, there were the old ways of the Etruscans. They carved figures of gods from cypress and oak trees believed to bleed when wounded trees whispered to be alive. To place an idol in a temple was not to create a symbol, but to call down a presence. The wood was not decoration, it was inhabited. Travel east, and in Egypt we find the same belief. Shrines of Osiris carried wooden statues that were treated as the very body of the god. Priests washed them, dressed them, fed them. When the idol was moved in procession, the crowd cried out not to an object, but to a living being. To harm such wood was to harm the divine itself. Farther still in Mesopotamia, the ritual was precise and terrifying. The Mise-Pi mouth-opening ceremony was performed on carved statues. Through incantations, offerings, and breath, the idol's mouth and eyes were ritually opened so that it could eat, drink, and see. From that moment on, it was alive. No longer wood, but a god among men. Even in Greece, where philosophers scoffed at superstition, the wooden cult image, the Zoanon, was revered. The Athenians believed the Palladion, an ancient wooden statue of Athena, had fallen from heaven. Their city's fate was bound to it. As long as the idol stood, Athens would endure. And in the north, among the Norse sacred trees and carved poles carried the same charge. When the settlers of Iceland came ashore, they cast wooden pillars marked with the signs of their gods into the waves, letting the sea decide where they should build. Wherever the wood landed there, the divine had chosen their home. Even beyond Europe, the pattern repeats. In Japan, the Shintai objects that housed kami were often wooden mirrors or carved figures, so charged with spirit that only priests could approach them. Among the Yoruba of West Africa, carved masks and figures were not art, but bodies waiting for the god or ancestor to descend and animate them during ritual. Again and again, wood is more than wood. It is a threshold, a skin for the unseen. Seen in this light, Pinocchio's story no longer feels whimsical at all. A puppet that comes alive is not fantasy.
This is for our
survival
safety.
Of the ancient conviction that wood can house a soul. His trials, temptation, punishment, rebirth mirror the trials once placed upon divine images, tested to prove their authenticity, honored as more than human. But there is something darker. For just as idols could be honored,
Is
they could
wood
also be
truly
mocked,
empty,
broken, or burned.
or does it hold the
Early
quiet
Christians
breath of
smashed
life
wooden
within its
statues of
grain?
the old gods, declaring them lifeless things. Medieval Europe feared wooden puppets and automata as diabolical suspect vessels where demons might lurk. To give voice to carved wood was to play with fire, to risk calling down something unholy. Pinocchio's lies, his violence, his eerie half-life, these are not just the mistakes of a child. They echo the fear that animated wood might betray its maker, that a vessel might not hold divinity, but something wayward, something dangerous. And yet this fear always existed side by side with reverence, because behind every idol, every puppet, every carved image lay the same question: was the wood truly empty, or was something living inside? If we look closer, we find that this belief was not only cultural but practical, rooted in the very bones of human survival. For archaeology tells us that since the dawn of civilization, wood has been carved, shaped, and preserved, not just as tools, but as sacred bodies. Beneath the soil among the oldest remains lie fragments of idols that once stared with painted eyes. If Pinocchio's story echoes ancient belief, then the earth itself should remember, and it does. Archaeologists have uncovered wooden idols buried deep in the peat bogs of northern Europe, in Ireland, Germany, and Denmark. Strange figures carved from oak have surfaced from the dark soil. Some date back more than 3,000 years. They stand with hollow eyes and exaggerated features, their limbs stiff as though jointed like puppets. These are not toys. They were offerings planted into the wet earth as sacrifices, guardians of thresholds between the living and the dead. One of the oldest and most haunting is the Shigir Idol found in the Ural Mountains of Russia. Preserved in a peat bog, it is over 12,000 years old, older than the pyramids, older than farming itself. Carved from larch wood, its tall frame is covered with geometric patterns and faces stacked one upon another. To hold such a figure was to face a memory from the Ice Age, when
Look
wood
at
was
the
not
preservation.
only fuel, but the medium
It's
of the
incredible.
sacred. Many scholars believe it embodied ancestral spirits watching silently across generations. Closer to Italy, Collodi's homeland, the traces are just as strong. The Etruscans, predecessors of the Romans, filled their sanctuaries with wooden statues. Ancient writers noted that when a temple temple caught fire, it was not the stone columns that were mourned, but the wooden idols that perished inside. For those were the true bodies of the gods. Even in Rome, before marble and bronze, the earliest figures of Jupiter were carved from wood. And then there are the bog bodies. In several sites across northern Europe, human remains have been found placed beside wooden effigies. Some were bound, some broken, as though enacting a ritual drama between living sacrifice and wooden double. Did people believe the wood absorbed the soul, becoming a companion in the journey beyond death? The evidence whispers yes. Even beyond Europe, archaeology confirms the pattern. In Japan, ancient Shinto shrines preserved wooden relics, some so sacred that they were buried after use rather than discarded. In West Africa, ritual figures carved from timber are still passed down today, their surfaces worn smooth from centuries of offerings. And in the Andes, archaeologists have found wooden idols preserved high in mountain shrines still standing watch long after their makers vanished. Science also reminds us of something crucial: wood decays. Unlike stone or metal, it rarely survives the centuries. That we have any of these idols at all is an accident of bog's ice or desert sands, which means what we see is only the smallest fragment of what once existed. For every idol recovered, countless more have rotted away, their voices lost. And yet the persistence of this belief that wood can hold the divine survives even in the archaeological record. It suggests that humans have always felt something uncanny about trees. After all, wood is not inert. Even after being cut, it cracks, bends, releases sap, carries the smell of resin. It is material that still behaves as though alive. To carve a face into it is to invite a presence. To join its limbs with pegs and hinges is to mimic the human body. A puppet, a doll, an idol, these are not far apart. Seen through this lens, Pinocchio's transformation is more than fantasy. It is a retelling of what humans have always known, that wood is never fully dead, that it can be shaped into vessels of life, that somewhere in its grain and fibers a soul might be waiting. But why did we believe this so fervently? Why carve faces into logs? Why whisper prayers to puppets? Why risk seeing in them something more than human? To answer that, we must step beyond archaeology and into the realm of meaning. Because beneath the soil and the wood lies not only evidence, but symbols, and symbols carry truths that science alone cannot explain. What does it mean to carve a face into wood, to dress it in clothing, to bow before it as if it could see? The answer lies not in the material, but in the symbol. Wood, unlike stone or bronze, carries fragility. It cracks, burns, rots, yet it also grows. Every line in its grain tells a story of years that storms endured, roots sunk deep into the earth. To carve a puppet like Pinocchio is to carve memory into flesh that once lived as a tree. The boy of wood is already a paradox, both dead matter and living, past lifeless body and vessels of life. His long nose is more than a punishment for lies. It is a branch that refuses to stop growing, a reminder that he is still tethered to the tree from which he was cut. Each falsehood pushes him back toward wood, away from flesh. His only path to humanity is through truth, and truth in every culture was the measure of worth. To lie was to remain an idol, a hollow thing. To tell truth was to awaken into a soul. And then there is the fairy with blue hair, Pinocchio's spectral guide. She appears as sister, mother, guardian, never fixed, always shifting. She represents the unseen force that watches over idols, the priestess, the goddess, the anima. In many traditions, carved figures were not left alone. They were tended by women, clothed and fed as though children. The fairy is this archetype binding Pinocchio to ritual care, reminding him that to be more than wood, he must learn to obey the sacred order. Even the trials Pinocchio faces carry symbolic weight. To be hanged from a tree is to be suspended between two worlds, neither alive nor dead. To be swallowed by the sea monster is to be taken into the womb of chaos where he must be reborn. To become a donkey is to be reduced to instinct body without reason. Each ordeal strips him down until only a soul struggling to emerge remains. At the end of his journey, when he awakens as flesh, we are told he is a real boy. But symbolically, he is not simply a child. He is an idol transfigured. A vessel once feared and tested, now accepted as fully human. He embodies the ancient hope that carved wood might transcend its nature, that through suffering and truth, a hollow figure might contain something eternal. In this way, Pinocchio is more than a fable about honesty.
Were we
He is the memory
only
of our
projecting
oldest
our
rituals,
desires?
where wood was animated and tested, where idols were believed to house gods or demons, where the fragile line between object and soul was crossed. His story repeats the drama of sacred wood temptation, trial, death, rebirth, but there is still a deeper question. For if Pinocchio symbolizes the transformation of wood into life, what does that say about us? The storytellers, the carvers, the believers? Were we only projecting our own desires, our longing for the soul to survive within fragile matter? Or were we glimpsing something more, a truth about what it means to be human itself? To answer that, we must leave the world of symbols and enter the world of thought. For behind every puppet and every idol lies a philosophy about truth, about humanity, about the soul struggling within the body. What is a puppet if not the most fragile image of humanity? It has limbs but no will, a face but no breath. It is a body waiting to be animated. And in this strange halfway state, Pinocchio becomes a mirror for us all. For is the human being not also a kind of puppet, shaped from dust, animated by something unseen? The Greeks spoke of Prometheus molding mankind from clay into which the gods breathed life. In the Hebrew scriptures, Adam is formed from earth, and only when breath enters him does he become a living soul. The line between puppet and person is thinner than we like to admit. Pinocchio's struggle then is our own. He yearns to be real, but he is bound by weakness, lies, pride, disobedience. Each time he succumbs, he remains a puppet empty of true humanity. Each time he suffers and learns, he takes a step closer to becoming flesh. His story suggests that to be human is not automatic. It must be earned through ordeal, through truth. This echoes a philosophy found across cultures that the soul is forged in trial. The mystics of India spoke of Maya, the illusion that binds us like strings on a puppet, and of liberation through truth. In Plato's dialogues, human beings are shadows in a cave, mistaking puppets for reality until knowledge sets them free. In Buddhism, the self itself is a puppet, a collection of parts with no true essence yet. Through awakening, one may find freedom beyond illusion. Even modern thought reflects the same unease. Are we autonomous beings, or are we puppets of our desires, our instincts, our societies? Philosophers from Descartes to Nietzsche asked whether we truly direct our own strings, or whether invisible hands of nature, of culture, of fate
I
pull
promise
us
to
without our knowing.
always tell the truth
Pinocchio,
from
with
now
his dangling
on.
limbs and stubborn will, embodies that question. And always there is the theme of truth. His nose grows with lies, not as a child's joke, but as a warning the human condition depends on truthfulness. To lie is to fracture the soul to become hollow again. To speak truth is to align body and spirit, wood and breath. Collodi's tale seems to whisper that truth is the spark that transforms matter into being. Yet beneath this moral lesson lies a more unsettling idea. Perhaps humanity itself is always precarious, always at risk of collapsing back into wood. Perhaps the difference between idol and person, between puppet and soul, is fragile, thin as a thread. And if that is true, then Pinocchio does not simply tell us how to become real. It confronts us with a haunting question. Are we already real, or are we still struggling like him to prove it? These questions are not just moral, but metaphysical. They reach toward the mystery of the soul itself, what it is, where it comes from, how it clings to matter. And this is where Pinocchio's story, like the tales of wooden idols, before it brushes against something vast and terrifying, the unknown, that lies at the edge of philosophy, where story becomes myth and myth becomes silence. And so we return at last to the boy of wood. He is more than a puppet, more than a fable. He is a riddle about us, about our origin, our fragility, and our search for truth. But if Pinocchio hides this riddle, then what of the other tales we think we know? How many more puppets, pigs, maidens, and monsters are not inventions for children at all, but the shadows of ancient gods waiting to be remembered? So what is Pinocchio truly? Not only a puppet with a growing nose, not only a tale of obedience for children, he is the last shadow of wooden idols carved with faces and given breath, tested as vessels for the soul. In his lies and punishments, in his hanging and rebirth, we hear the echo of ancient rituals meant to decide whether matter could hold spirit, whether a figure of wood might become divine. But if this is true, then how many of our other stories hide the same secret? How many toys, dolls, or effigies we dismiss as playthings are in truth the fading memories of a time when wood was alive, when objects spoke, when the boundary between human and idol was thin as air? Pinocchio's transformation asks us a question we cannot easily answer. Are we so different from him? Or are we still puppets pulled by unseen strings, waiting for the spark of truth to set us free? And if one children's story carries such a secret, then what of the others? What forgotten gods hide in the laughter of fairy tales? What ancient trials lie buried in the bedtime stories we whisper to our children? Perhaps Pinocchio is not an ending, but a doorway. Step through it, and we find that every tale is not a dream, but a memory, not fantasy, but survival, not wood, but soul. And somewhere just beyond the edge of the stories we think we know, another secret waits to be uncovered.